everybody. Welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC's Devin Dwyer, joined by our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks. It's Wednesday in Washington. We're headed toward a vote, hopefully, to avoid a government shutdown on Friday at midnight. But there seem to be a couple of last-minute hang-ups, Mary Alice. We'll get into those. But the president today seemed to signal that he's at least ruled out in his mind forcing a shutdown, and he isn't yet committing, though, to signing the bill.
I was curious how you were going to decode what the president said, because that's exactly what they're trying to do on Capitol Hill. They're trying to have a sense of what exactly this president will sign, and so far, all indications he will sign it, but begrudgingly.
Begrudgingly, because he's going to get less money for a physical barrier along the southern border with Mexico than he would have had on the table even before the last shutdown. Here's what our Cecilia Vega asked the president about the funding issue in the Oval Office just a little bit earlier. Take a listen.
Mr. President, are you willing to take less money this time than what was on the table just a few months ago?
Actually, it will be regardless of what I do. You know, we already have, as you know, a lot of money where we're building existing wall with existing funds, but I have a lot of options. Just like we do with Venezuela, we have on the border. And we have a lot of options, and a lot of things are happening, very positive things. You know, the numbers are almost $23 billion, which you don't report too often. It's about an 8% increase over last year. So if you look at the total funding, it's almost up to $23 billion. It's about 8% higher.
We'll get into some of where that $23 billion came from in a little bit, but I do want to bring in our Capitol Hill reporter, Catherine Falder. She's been on the story all day long, talking to lawmakers on both sides. Catherine, first want to get your sense about the vote that has to happen before President Trump can even consider signing it or not. Congress has to vote on it. Where do we stand on the House and the Senate actually voting on the deal?
Yeah, exactly. They still have to vote on this. We haven't seen that text yet. The president says he also hasn't seen the full text of that. We're expecting that tonight. And then we also expect a vote on this in the House, we're told, sometime tomorrow evening. So that doesn't leave too much room for, of course, the Senate to bring this up for a vote and then for the president to sign it, Devin. But I would say that we were talking a little bit about this beforehand. The two sticking points here with this deal are back pay for federal workers and the Violence Against Women's Act. Now, Roy Blunt told our own Trish Turner that he's been told the president won't sign that when asked why federal contractors' back pay is being held up. And the other aspect of this is the Violence Against Women's Act, where Democrats don't necessarily want a full year of that as well.
All right, just Democrats, rather. Tina Smith, senator of Minnesota, some money for all those federal contractors. 30-day shutdown hit a month ago. They were out of luck, and they didn't get back pay approved ahead of time. So this is an effort at the 11th hour now to get some recompense for them. And I'm sort of surprised that Republicans are opposed to that, because there are so many of these people who are hurting.
It might be because this would be expensive. Shutdowns tend to be pretty expensive for exactly this reason. The government has standing contracts that a lot of people think should be honored, even if the federal government isn't going to pay its bills all of a sudden. And you're right, there are real people's lives reflected in those numbers. Contractors like janitors and security officers who were doing the work, a lot of them working even during the shutdown, but without pay. Democrats now arguing that they should get some back pay.
And we're joined now on the phone by one of those contract workers, Venorika Tucker. She's a contractor with the food service company that supplies meals in the U.S. House of Representatives. Venorika, you're joining us now. Great to have you. You were out of work for 30 days without pay. Tell us the financial impact the shutdown had on you as a contract worker and what you'd like to see Congress do now to make that right.
I'd like to see Congress make the workers whole. We've been working, and when we don't get paid, because we work paycheck to paycheck, we're living that way. When we don't get paid, we suffer greatly. So many of us I'm a shop steward with my union here on Capitol Hill, and many of the workers are in jeopardy of having utilities turned off, struggling to put food on the table and pay their other bills, medical bills and such. And so I would like to see Congress consider the fact that these people are human beings who have to live just like they do. And it's very difficult for us.
Did you or any of your colleagues consider moving companies or changing jobs in the wake of this shutdown? There's a part of me that wonders if there is a question of job security in the event of such a long shutdown.
Well, I don't think people thought that because it's just it's very difficult. The job market, even though you hear it differently, it's real difficult to move out of one thing and get into something else. And we've seen that in the area that we are working in the District of Columbia and the surrounding area, that many people were affected by this, not just the federal government workers, but many people. When the federal government shuts down, folks don't go out and eat or go out and spend money. So it was not just these particular federal agencies, but it was a trickle down to everybody.
Venorka Tucker, a contract worker in the food service at the House, on the job now, making a paycheck again, but very concerned about the prospect of another shutdown, also seeking some back pay. Venorka, thanks so much for calling in and sharing your perspective. Appreciate that.
Just so many people.
Yeah.
You forget, right? I mean, people that are working in cafeterias, that are working as janitors, that are keeping these institutions afloat.
And generally low-page workers, they're not getting the federal benefits that federal employees are getting. Republicans are sort of in a tight spot here, right? I mean, they, as you were hearing today up on the Hill, they want this deal to go through. They don't want another shutdown, and yet they're sort of being hammered by conservative commentators, both about the lack of funding in the wall and also the expense that this would incur.
Right, provisions like this. Republicans have said there's just not an appetite for another shutdown, and I think Democrats see that, and they see there's some political wiggle room, and so they're trying to make sure that they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's right now in the 11th hour.
And meanwhile, the president is trying to sell his base on this idea that he's actually constructing a border wall. Let's go back to Catherine Falders up on the Hill. Catherine, we heard the president mention at the top of the show that he is inclined to take the deal because he can cobble together $23 billion in border wall money from other places. Where's he getting that number from?
Yeah, the $23 billion, Devin, in my mind, is a little bit of a distraction here. That's under the operating budget of the Department of Homeland Security, as it has to do with border funding, not necessarily building this wall. Now, what he is talking about doing, and where this gets a little bit complicated, is that there's talk of him taking that $1.4 billion deal, but at the same time, pulling money from other agencies, from other pots. So for the Department of Defense, for example, there's a federal statute where he can pull at most $4 billion from their budget. Now, I'm told from sources that that is unlikely to happen. They're unlikely to get all of that $4 billion. But still, even with that, that wouldn't get him to that 5.7 that he wants for that wall. So in addition to reprogramming money there, many on the Hill and our sources have said that he will likely declare a national emergency as well to get him to that $5.7 billion mark, but it could also put him way over that mark. So there's talk that he could do the $1.4 billion, then reappropriate funds from other departments and declare a national emergency as well. Now, his top advisors up here, Senator Lindsey Graham, Congressman Mark Meadows, they're also saying that they think that he'll do both of these options as well.
We shall see. Catherine Falders, thanks so much for your reporting up on Capitol Hill. Mary Alice, we should say yesterday in the briefing room, we heard from top Democrats they will not take that sitting down if the president tries to reappropriate money. They are vowing to look at everything to challenge the president's authority on this.
Right. They say this would be executive overreach, that it is up to Congress to appropriate money. Congress has the power of the purse.
Meanwhile, shifting gears now to the vice president. He's quite active. He's undertaken a whirlwind tour of Europe at this hour, left early this morning to head to a couple countries to take on Middle East security, countering Iran. Our Rachel Scott, White House reporter, is traveling with the vice president, has a chance to rub elbows with him on Air Force 2. She joins us now. Rachel, great to see you. So tell us what this trip is all about. What's in store?
Well, the White House tells me Vice President Pence is expected to send a very strong message to Iran. And the United States is partnering with Poland to host the international conference here in Warsaw that is aimed at maybe solving some of the security concerns and some of the problems out of the Middle East. Now, the vice president arrived today. Like you said, I was with him on Air Force 2, and he got a warm welcome as he came into the airport. He was greeted by more than 600 military members from the armed forces from Poland and the United States. The The United States has about 4,500 troops based here as of right now, but they could be expecting to get even more. There has been talk about even expanding that, maybe even having a U.S. military base here to allow permanent residence for some of those American troops here. And today's message was really focused on developing that relationship and that alliance between Poland and the United States. Vice President Pence called it more than just an alliance. He called it a friendship. And so today they were focused on that and expanding the NATO alliance and working together. And so they say that this is something that's going to stand firm. The vice president echoed that he's standing firm behind Poland and that they're looking forward to continue to working together. Devin?
Yeah, actually standing next to Poland as Poland stands up to Russia and in support of NATO. And before we let you go, Rachel, know you're traveling on that plane with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, Mark Greenblatt. He's the top Middle East negotiator, which is very interesting. And you had quite an encounter with that whole crew at a fuel stop overseas on the way there. I heard you rubbed elbows with some of them in the duty-free.
Yeah, so I have to admit, this is my first time taking an international trip with the vice president. And we arrived on Air Force Two. We stopped in Ireland to refuel, and we got to stretch our legs a little bit, right? It was a long flight. I ran into the vice president in the duty-free store. He was greeting and talking to some of the military and armed force members that were there. And I got a little carried away. It looked like the vice president left empty-handed. Me, on the other hand, I got all the goodies. So much so I went back, stood in line, and I looked up, and everybody was gone. So I made a mad dash towards that gate. I made it. I'm here. I'm fine. But, you know, maybe just a first-timer's mistake. I will definitely spend a lot less time in that duty-free store the next time, Devin.
All right, a rookie traveling with the vice president, but a smart one at that. Rachel Scott, thanks for that reporting from Warsaw, Poland, at a very late hour there. Thanks, Rachel. We'll check back in with you.
I missed a pool bus
I
once at the
know.
Vatican.
It's a scary thing on your first time when traveling with these top officials. Moving on now to an ABC News exclusive. We sat down a little bit earlier today for the first network interview with the acting EPA administrator, soon to be likely confirmed by the United States Senate, Andrew Wheeler. He's a very interesting figure, and we talked to him today about a new plan he is rolling out, and bringing our environmental reporter now, Stephanie Ebbs, who helped bring us the interview, also has been studying this new plan. Stephanie, Andrew Wheeler talked to us about this proposal to tackle two of the most common toxic chemicals in the United States that Americans come into contact with but don't know about. What are these things?
I mean, these are chemicals that are used in non-stick pots and pans. If you like your waterproof jacket on hikes, it coats that. It's used in firefighting foam. They're so common that every American has some amount of them in their blood. The problem is people in some communities are being exposed to a lot more. And EPA is set to roll out tomorrow this big plan on how it will deal with the chemicals.
And
in
we're seeing some
drinking
pictures
water.
here of what it looks like, this chemical. They're called PFAS. You may have heard of it, PFAS. It's the acronym, but it showed up in lakes. These in Michigan, you're seeing it causes this foaming on the shorelines, but also it's in the drinking water of 16 million Americans. The EPA hasn't regulated a new chemical in drinking water since 1996, but they took a big step today. Here's a little bit of my conversation with Andrew Wheeler earlier about the danger this poses to Americans. Take a look. How dangerous is the situation right now, in your view, with these chemicals?
Well, we do consider it to be a very important threat, and that's why we're moving quickly on this.
So the CDC, a report which just came out, said that PFAS is associated with pregnancy-induced hypertension, liver damage, thyroid disease, decreased fertility, increased risks of asthma, testicular, kidney cancer. That sounds pretty serious.
It is serious, and that's why we're moving forward with this action plan. And this is a really groundbreaking action plan by the agency. We've done 8 enforcement actions alone under our existing authorities, but we're moving forward to create new authorities under our Safe Drinking Water Act. We're moving forward to set new regulations, also called an MCL, maximum containment level. You know, we know where the chemicals were manufactured, and we know a lot of the areas where they were actually used. So we're going into those communities to see whether or not the water in those communities are contaminated. But this is, again, we haven't slowed down. We've actually speeded up the process.
And it's a very controversial position that he's taking. Mary Alice, you've closely tracked the Democrats' opposition to the president's EPA nominees, including Andrew Wheeler, who's a former coal industry lobbyist. Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, has said that Andrew Wheeler is not doing enough to protect New Yorkers from those two chemicals, and he might block his confirmation. He can talk big, though, but
Well, this is really interesting, and why this new rollout from the EPA is a big deal, not only for the lives of Americans, but also politically. He might be able to sway some Democrats to vote for him and work with this administration in this manner going forward. Because you're exactly right. Democrats have been really frustrated with what has, by and large, been a rollback of regulations on energy production, on pesticides, and this is really a move in the other direction.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm struck. You've talked to a lot of EPA officials. You know the administrator as well,
Yeah.
and he's a much less flashy figure than Scott Pruitt was, the first EPA administrator who resigned in that scandal, that ethics scandal, was very combative.
Yeah.
It does seem like Wheeler is trying to sort of calm the water, so to speak, and is conscious about his legacy.
I do get that impression. I mean, he'll tell you he was a coal industry lobbyist. He also started at EPA. He's worked on environmental committees on the Hill. Compared to the kind of flash and controversy of the Pruitt administration, he seems, very thoughtful. He tends, in my impression is that he prefers to spend his time talking about policy.
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. We'll have the full thing. We'll run the full thing for you, all 20 minutes tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC News Live. We talked to him about the Green New Deal. We talked to him about climate change. We talked to him about President Trump and President Trump's view that climate change is a hoax. So there's a lot in there. And tune in a little bit later tonight.
Great.
It should be good stuff. Finally, though, we've got to talk about something a little bit lighter. I'm not a golfer. You, Mary Alice?
Yeah.
You are? All right, well, then you need to go over to the White House and check out the new, check out the president's new toy in the residence. The Washington Post broke the story that President Trump has installed a new simulated golf a golf simulator in a room in the residence in the White House. Looks like something like this. Have you ever used one of those?
Yeah, of course I have.
You're a hardcore golfer. Gosh,
no, we use this when we're trying out new clubs, obviously. And some resorts have them when you're getting ready and warming up. This looks awesome. I'm sure there are some people that will criticize the president for this. Who knows how much it costs? Any change to the White House can be controversial. But we know he's a golf enthusiast. He's owned golf courses around the world. And come on, these are pretty fun.
I imagine they are. I need to try them out now. You've sold me. We should add that President Obama did have a golf simulator in the White House as well. It was a lower tech version of this, so we're told that this is simply an upgrade for President Trump. And he did pay for it apparently out of his own money. The Washington Post reports that it costs about $50,000 for one of those machines. It does seem President Trump would probably have the cash to cover that, but
clear your head, hit some golf balls, virtually or not.
He's been holed up in there for all these shutdown days, so he got some golf time.
Been getting a lot of rain
virtual
here in DC.
golf. All right, great to have you with us, Stephanie Ebbs, and for your reporting on the environment. Much more at abcnews.com. Always fun to have Mary Alice Parks here with us, fresh off the Hill. Great to have you joining us today here in the briefing room. We'll be back tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time. Be sure to check out our Andrew Wheeler EPA exclusive, 6 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live. We'll see you next time.